This is the extraordinary story of thalidomide, a drug that even today no one fully understands, but which some now want to bring back. Chase Peterson was looking forward to a long and happy retirement.
Foul. I played tennis since I was 5 years old. It is part of the definition of life. Joyful, fun.
But Chase should have died 3 years ago. In 1997, he was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a type of blood cancer which is always fatal.
The diagnosis was clear. I would be dead in 2 to 4 or 5 years. My wife and I together, we prepared for me to die. Not in a morbid way, not really in a frightened way, but made the necessary steps.
For 2 years, he held the disease at bay with chemotherapy. But then the cancer came back. His only option was a painful and dangerous bone marrow transplant.
That's tough treatment. It rarely cures anybody, and it gives you an extra year or 2. Well, if that's all you can have, you're grateful for that. But it was not a very pleasant prospect.
As Chase was a doctor himself, he searched for an alternative treatment. He soon heard of a new wonder drug, a drug with a terrifying past.
I had almost nothing to lose, and the only question was, how long would it take for us to know if it worked? And to our great joy, within 2 weeks, my levels had dropped. In 6 weeks, they were down to normal.
The drug that saved Chase's life was thalidomide.
The word wonder drug has probably been overused. In this country, we have a bread called Wonder Bread, and there's Wonder Woman. Well, I'll tell you, thalidomide is a wonder drug.
The claim that thalidomide is a miracle drug could not be more shocking to someone like Kevin Donnellan. He is one of more than 4,000 people around the world who know firsthand this drug's ability to ruin lives.
The younger generation, I think, don't realise the dangers of thalidomide. Because it was in the 1960s, I think it is largely forgotten. Doctors in the 1960s had one excuse. You know, they didn't really know the effects of the drug. But, you know, all the doctors now in the world know the effects of thalidomide, or they should do. I mean, you know, I'm living proof of the effects of thalidomide.
The story of thalidomide began in 1954, when the drug was discovered by accident. Chemists at a pharmaceutical firm in Germany had been trying to produce an anti-allergy drug. It didn't work. Instead, all the lab rats fell asleep. The scientists had discovered a new tranquilizer that was harmless even when overdosed. Marketed under the name Distaval, it became so popular it was taken like aspirin. Doctors prescribed it for all kinds of minor symptoms that they thought were linked to anxiety, including morning sickness. And this was the use that was to have devastating consequences. Agnes Donnellan was one of millions of women who were prescribed thalidomide.
I was about 6 weeks pregnant with Kevin, and I had very bad morning sickness. I went to the doctors. He said, oh, we have some new tablets on the market. He said, we'll try them. And they were called Distaval, which is thalidomide.
Agnes took 2 tablets. Months later, she gave birth to her baby son. But for some mysterious reason, she wasn't allowed to see him for 2 days.
All the mums in the ward were getting the babies and I wasn't. And I kept looking around wondering why. And so I asked the sister and she said, "Oh, I'll see you tomorrow." She said, your baby is not too well. I was taken down in a wheelchair. She pushed me over to a cot and then she left me. She didn't tell me what was wrong with him or anything. She just left me by the cot and she said, "Oh, by the way," she said, "he's got very short arms and legs." My brain thought when she said to me he's only got short arms and legs, he had short, complete arms and legs. She didn't tell me what was wrong with him at all, completely. So when I lifted him up, I put the blanket around, I got the shock of my life.
No one had an explanation for Agnes. And around the country, more and more babies were being born with the same malformations.
When I first saw one of these babies, I was absolutely shaken. Perfect head, perfect trunk, normal baby, just no arms and legs. None of us had ever seen anything like this. When this happens in ones or twos, one can develop some kind of response. But when this happens in considerable numbers, I think people were overwhelmed and simply didn't know what to think or what to do.
It soon became clear that the same tragedy was unfolding in many other countries around the world. But no one had any idea what was causing it.
One realized that a major disaster had occurred, but we really had no idea what the cause was.
It remained a mystery for almost 5 years, until a young Australian obstetrician named William McBride made the connection. He examined the medical records of 3 disabled babies that he had delivered. McBride realized that early on in pregnancy, before the fetus was fully formed, the mothers had all taken the drug Distaval. His discovery was published in December 1961.
My feeling was partly relief, part horror. Relief that at last a cause had been found and that therefore one might be able to see the end of the epidemic, but horror that this was another example of a man-made disaster.
When I heard what did it, I thought, well, somebody somewhere's got to pay for this. So it wasn't a revenge thing at all, because what had happened. But someone has to be shown up about this, because it could happen to other mums, and this drug has got to be banned.
The drug was finally withdrawn in the summer of 1962. But by then, over 8,000 thalidomide children had been born in 46 countries. Only half of them survived past the first month of life. What puzzled scientists was how could a drug that was so harmless to adults be capable of causing such damage to the bodies of these tiny babies? Until then, it was thought that any drug that was safe for the mother had to be safe for the fetus.
It was an absolute shock to realize that chemicals that were apparently very safe and somewhat innocuous could have totally unexpected effects on the development of the embryo. And that is the most significant feature of the whole thalidomide episode.
Scientists tried to understand exactly how the drug stopped limbs from developing in the womb. But they couldn't tell what was happening when thalidomide entered the body.
Thalidomide is not a very stable chemical. As soon as you take it into the body or even put it into a solution in the laboratory, it immediately starts to break down and you get lots of breakdown products. We're never absolutely sure whether the effects we see are caused by thalidomide itself or one of these many other breakdown products.
In the end, only one thing became clear. The damage only occurred in the first 60 days of pregnancy. Even today, thalidomide remains a disturbing enigma. Scientists have still not managed to solve the riddle of how this chemical works. Although the scientists were defeated, the thalidomide children learned to adapt.
We're all like different shapes and sizes. The majority of thalidomides actually have got legs and they're affected in their arms. They've got shortened arms. I'm not the worst affected in the country. I mean, one or two have got no hands at all. I can't imagine how I'd cope independently if I didn't have any hands at all. That would be a total nightmare.
Medical science did try to make amends to the children who were living with the effects of thalidomide. For years, these children underwent repeated and painful operations and were fitted with crude artificial limbs.
I looked totally ridiculous in them. I looked like a robot. They were totally unfunctional. I mean, I couldn't do anything in them. These are arms which are activated by gas cylinders, which you move your shoulder, and then the claws would open. Most of the time, you just drop things. I mean, I can do more things with these hands than these, and they were extremely heavy, and I felt really like caged in. The gas wouldn't last that long, and sometimes you'd be picking up a cup, say, and you get it halfway to your mouth, and then the gas would run out. The legs in some ways were worse because they were far more dangerous. I mean, these were extremely heavy, you know. The design hasn't really changed since the First World War. With having no arms, I couldn't save myself if I fell over and, you know, fall to the ground like that. It was a constant fear. Any second I expected to fall forwards or backwards, you know, straight on my face or on my head. I've got loads of stitches in the back of my head.
There was no getting round the tragedy. Thalidomide was branded one of the biggest disasters in medical history. But only 3 years later, it was resurrected. In 1965, opinions about thalidomide began to change. This new chapter of its story began in Jerusalem, where a disease that's been with us since biblical times was still rife. Leprosy. Around 5% of leprosy patients develop a painful and sometimes fatal side effect to their condition called ENL. ENL is the body's immune response to the leprosy bacteria. It causes deep inflammatory skin nodules on the face, arms and thighs, and can lead to deformities. So distressing was this constant pain to patients at one hospital that a doctor, Jacob Sheskin, was determined to find some way of relieving their suffering. In the hospital pharmacy, he stumbled across an old bottle of thalidomide. Sheskin decided to give it to his patients so they could at least get some rest. What happened next was quite unexpected. Literally overnight, their skin lesions cleared up. No one could understand why. Sheskin announced his results to an astonished world.
I read thalidomide was being used for leprosy. At first, I was quite incredulous that this drug was being used for anything at all. I thought it had been sort of relegated completely.
In leprosy areas around the world, the demand for thalidomide grew as word spread about this novel treatment. New stocks of the drug were made in Brazil and exported to other countries. The discovery of the curative properties of thalidomide was a milestone in its history. But But still, no one knew why it was working.
We do not understand how the birth defects are caused by thalidomide, and we do not understand equally many of the beneficial effects of thalidomide. It is always a surprise when a relatively simple molecule, a drug like thalidomide, has such a range of biological effects.
It became clear that thalidomide, for some reason, regulated the immune system of leprosy patients. So doctors tried it out on other diseases of the immune system. One condition to benefit was Behçet's disease. In Behçet's disease, the immune system mistakenly attacks and harms the body's own tissues. Among the major symptoms are sores and ulcers, particularly in the mouth and on the genitals. A team of medical staff in Nottingham, headed by Dr. Richard Powell, had started thalidomide as a treatment for Behçet's disease, despite the drug not being officially licensed.
Behçet's disease is very unpleasant because not only do they get severe oral ulcers, but also severe genital ulcers. So when they pass urine, I've known ladies to bite on a towel because they know how much pain there's going to be.
I suffered with genital ulcers the size of the palm of your hand.
Oh, we're going to have a look down below later.
I couldn't eat. I was eating compound meals through a straw. I had to take a rubber ring with me everywhere because I couldn't sit down from the severe pain of the ulcer.
Sarah's symptoms were so severe that Dr. Powell decided he would have to try thalidomide.
Within a matter of 3 weeks of taking thalidomide, all my symptoms had gone. It's it works so fast. It really is a miracle drug.
The results were just outstanding. We couldn't believe our eyes. The first 3 patients, within 14 to 21 days, the ulcers that had troubled them for years just disappeared. Thalidomide blocks one of the inflammatory mediators in the body like nothing else that we currently have available. And therefore, for those conditions where this particular mediator is important, thalidomide is unique, necessary, and there are no substitutes.
But the dark side of thalidomide was to re-emerge, this time in Brazil. Here, the drug was widely available as a cure for the leprosy condition ENL. The results were heartbreaking. In the 70s and 80s, a new generation of thalidomide children were born in Brazil. These are the children born to mothers who took the drug during pregnancy. Mothers who did not speak English and couldn't read the warnings on the packets, or never understood the risks they were taking.
There was one kid on the video, he's about age 3, and his impairments were more or less exactly the same as mine, and he was getting around on the floor in the same way that I do. And I was just very, very angry, you know, and I had a sickening feeling inside when I realised, you know, that we've allowed this to happen yet again.
I think there is a continuing ethical dilemma in this. I think that with all the precautions that one can set up, there will continue inevitably to be a risk of it leaking into the population and causing yet more congenitally malformed babies.
It was this dark side of thalidomide that Sarah Craven was forced to confront in 1998. She had been using it to keep her ulcers at bay. In fact, the drug had kept her so healthy that it was now possible for her to undergo a major change in her life. Sarah became pregnant.
I'm 7 months pregnant now, and I haven't been taking thalidomide during pregnancy, but my symptoms have returned, suffering severe pain with a genital ulcer and mouth ulcers. And I need really some consultation as to whether I can go back on thalidomide during pregnancy.
Sarah and her husband turned to Dr. David Heath of Selly Oak Hospital for advice.
I just don't think for the next 5 or 6 weeks, I don't think I could cope.
I think we can think of putting you back on the thalidomide to try and get it healed up. Now, thalidomide, obviously, you know, is a drug we desperately try to avoid in pregnancy, but it's the early stages of pregnancy.
Others fear thalidomide may not be safe at any stage in pregnancy.
I think we cannot use the drug in pregnancy with absolute confidence at all. I think that there are still, well, clearly we do not know how it works, and therefore we cannot be absolutely sure of its safety in later stages. Perhaps there are aspects of the actions of thalidomide that are as yet undiscovered, and frankly we don't want to discover them in humans.
The week after seeing her doctor, Sarah had some deeply worrying news. Thalidomide wouldn't affect the child's limbs at this late stage, but nobody could be sure it wouldn't affect its brain.
On Saturday I was in excruciating pain with the genital ulcer, so I have taken 2 tablets. I've now just received a call from the hospital saying that there is some doubt whether I should have taken those tablets because of neurological problems it can cause to the baby. I'm sort of in a state of shock at the moment. I'm really devastated. I'm feeling really guilty because I'm sort of nervous that I've done something to the baby.
So Sarah returned to Nottingham to seek the reassurance of Dr. Richard Powell, the man who had pioneered the use of thalidomide in Behçet's disease.
After I'd taken them, I was just distraught, really, because they said that it could be neurological problems. And I was just sort of like, wow, you know.
No,
what have
the
I
baby
done?
will be fully formed now, and that really isn't an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
That was a horrendous consultation. I found that very difficult. I did reassure Sarah, because I think she is at very low risk of fetal damage. The reality is, although thalidomide is meant to only damage babies in the early part of pregnancy, we don't know that it can't do it later on in pregnancy. The point is she's now taken those tablets. Any damage that's happened has happened, and there's nothing we can do about it other than now have a very difficult few weeks waiting for that baby to be delivered.
Sarah Craven's son, Jake, was born on the 10th of September 1998.
We'd counted all your bits, and you'd been checked by the doctor. And he was perfect.
Jake is now 5.
Now he's healthy, he's happy, he's a normal child, just about to go to school. So, yeah, there's no sign of brain damage whatsoever.
The irony of Sarah's story is that though thalidomide can cause terrible birth defects, without it, she wouldn't have been able to have Jake.
I'm still taking thalidomide. It relieves me from pain quickly, and I wouldn't consider taking anything else. Without thalidomide, there would have been no Jake, because I wouldn't have been well enough to have him.
Such was the success of thalidomide that by the late 90s, the drug was in great demand for other immune disorders, from multiple sclerosis to AIDS. But the dangers to pregnant women and their unborn babies had not gone away. So the question was, how could thalidomide be controlled? This was the problem facing the American licensing authorities. They had to decide whether to take the momentous step of licensing this drug. The issue they faced was, could they ever actually fulfill their responsibility of controlling the drug if they decided to sanction it?
Every doc will get one of these folders. They're expected to use one for each patient.
The most extensive system of controls ever used was drawn up by the company hoping to market the drug. Among the controls patients had to sign a contract agreeing never to take thalidomide without at least 2 forms of contraception.
We don't want a thalidomide tragedy in this country. We know what this drug can do, and it's a really very, very special side effect. It does not have to happen. It's not inevitable. It can be prevented. If you don't expose a fetus to this drug, you will not have a birth defect.
So in July 1998, thalidomide was licensed, but only for the treatment of the ENL lesions of leprosy. For other diseases and elsewhere in the world, it remained unlicensed. But then came pressure to license the drug for a new condition, because thalidomide began to be used as a revolutionary treatment for one of our biggest and most feared diseases, cancer. Nancy Toohey was a flight attendant of a major airline. She met and married Mark in 1990. But 2 years later, she was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a type of blood cancer.
I was a 31-year-old woman, and I thought, well, how did this happen? What did I ingest or eat or smell, or what happened that I would have caught something like this? I just was really in shock.
In multiple myeloma, the cells produced in the bone marrow that normally fight infections are turned into malignant cells that ultimately destroy bone, damage kidneys, and lower immunity to disease.
They showed a 4.5-inch tumor on my iliac crest. I also had tumors on my shoulders and my femur and parts of my skull and my ribs.
Nancy knew nothing about multiple myeloma, and her doctor at the time didn't give her much information. She didn't know that within 2 to 4 years it could kill her.
The doctor said, there is no cure, but you'll do okay, kid. And I remember thinking, I'm gonna do okay. Darn right, I'm gonna do okay. I wanted so badly to not have this be my life.
All right, go Midnight, go Prancer.
Nancy started chemotherapy. After a year, there was some progress. Then, despite her cancer and against all the odds, Nancy gave birth to 2 children. Shannon, now 10, and Erin, now 8. With her family complete, Nancy went through the painful process of a bone marrow transplant.
So, and who's that in the picture with me?
Aunt Sally.
That's right.
The donor was her sister. The operation was dangerous, and her body was prey to numerous infections. But it was Nancy's only option.
I did get something very severe. I had a fever of 4 nights of like 106. It was just horrible. I was on near death.
But for 2 years, everything seemed to be going well. Then Nancy had a simple fall and fractured her back. It was the first sign that her disease had returned. But Nancy had already had all the conventional treatment on offer.
We were out of options. And I got to tell you, that was the time I was the most afraid of losing her. And I mean, I can remember having a conversation with her that, you know, that this can't happen because I'm not prepared to raise 2 little girls on my own.
Yep, we're gonna add in Aaron.
But then, a completely new treatment for multiple myeloma was suggested: thalidomide. It was Dr. Judah Folkman who was the first to spot a radical new way to treat cancer. His new theory would make thalidomide a key drug in fighting the disease. The traditional treatment was to use chemotherapy to attack cancer tumors directly. But Judah Folkman had the idea of attacking the tumours indirectly, by starving them of blood. His theory was tumours sent out signals that made it possible for them to create their own blood supply, a process he called angiogenesis.
I came to the conclusion that tumors are angiogenesis dependent. They were dependent on recruiting their own blood supply, and in the early 1970s that was greeted with much skepticism and a certain amount of ridicule.
Volkmann spent over 10 years proving he was right, and another 10 years trying to create a new drug that could prevent angiogenesis. But then, as a shortcut, a colleague suggested trying an existing drug like thalidomide. In their lab, thalidomide was tested on tumours and was shown to successfully limit the growth of blood vessels. It was then put into trials for a particularly lethal form of brain tumour and showed some success.
We do clearly have stabilization, which is the first step into a shrinkage of the tumor.
Then it was tried in other types of cancer with solid tumours. But it had not occurred to anyone that thalidomide could work against blood cancers. Cancers where the tumours grow in blood and are liquid. Cancers like multiple myeloma.
Thalidomide was being used for solid tumors, but no one thought it could be used for any bone marrow or leukemia type tumor, until a phone call that I received from a patient whose husband was very ill with multiple myeloma, and he had failed all of the drugs. I suggested that they try thalidomide.
Volkmann's thinking was that just like all other cancers, blood cancers were still crucially dependent on building their own blood supply. His evidence was based on this simple observation. A normal bone looks like this. But this is what it looks like when the patient has multiple myeloma. Although you can't see the cancer cells, the huge network of blood vessels they have built to bring oxygen and nutrients to help them grow is clearly visible, just like with a solid tumour. So thalidomide was tried on a group of patients who had failed all other therapy. It worked for about a third of them.
When those results were published, it was very exciting because previously there had been no other drug when you failed the standard drugs for multiple myeloma.
Among the first to try thalidomide was Nancy Toohey. It changed her life.
To find a medicine that she could take for 60 days that completely turned our life right side up, the way it ought to be, it was just the dream come true.
What do you think about these pictures, girls, huh?
Is that a wig?
Yes, that was my wig. I definitely was on a path of spiraling downward, and thalidomide gave me a great chance to watch my kids play and just grow up.
Unlike chemotherapy, thalidomide is taken in pill form. For someone like Nancy, it means no time has to be wasted traveling to and from hospital to take it intravenously. And because thalidomide doesn't kill healthy cells, those taking it don't feel sick or lose their hair. Although it's not a cure, thalidomide saved Nancy's life. And it hasn't just helped Nancy. This success has been repeated in trials carried out by Dr. Kenneth Anderson.
Excitingly, when we use thalidomide together with other drugs as the very first treatment that patients ever receive for their new myeloma, about 2/3 to 3/4 of patients respond, and they respond very quickly.
Some believe that the way it works against cancer could be a clue to why thalidomide had damaged all those babies years before.
the birth defects that were caused by thalidomide could possibly now be explained as interruptions in blood supply in the early embryo or fetus by that drug.
So was starving the limbs of blood the cause of all those terrible deformities? Even now it is very... Lab work at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute shows that thalidomide does much more to myeloma tumours than just starving them of blood.
We were able to show that thalidomide worked directly on killing the myeloma. It also critically disrupted the way the myeloma adheres to the so-called bone marrow stroma, a bit like a plant in its root system in the soil.
It also appears to kickstart the immune system to fight cancer. This multi-target approach makes thalidomide a particularly effective anti-cancer drug.
A lot of our newer drugs are very specific. They have one target. And one of the advantages to me of thalidomide is that it seems to hit several targets. It affects several different aspects of myeloma cell growth and survival. And in that respect, it's really quite unique.
This all adds to thalidomide's mystery. Just as no one is quite sure why it caused birth defects, so no one quite knows why it works so well against cancer. These uncertainties still surrounding the drug mean that many doctors will remain wary about prescribing it, particularly to women of childbearing age.
It's a continuing frustration to me and everybody else in our field that we have not been able to find out how thalidomide causes birth defects, and it will remain for us a major goal for the future until we do.
And it's not just pregnant women who might be at risk. Thalidomide can have other side effects, as Chase Peterson discovered.
It's quite a sleeping pill. I sleep like a baby after I've taken it at night. It gives you a little constipation. I take more Bran, I can do that. But the serious one for most people is a little peripheral neuritis, which is a fancy word for meaning you get tingling in your fingers and your toes. And I have some of that. It's not really a bother to me, but some people go on to get rather serious affliction with that and sort of shooting pains and things of this sort. And I would like that not to happen to me. No pain.
That tingling feeling is what doctors call neuropathy. It can be debilitating and irreversible. Chase found a way of minimizing it by taking the drug only when his myeloma is at its most severe. When his blood counts are normal, he stops.
Why treat something if I don't need to? At my suggestion, I said, let's watch it. And we did. And over 8 months, the levels gradually rose up, and we concluded that a certain level would be safe. Maybe above that, it might be doing damage to me. So at that level, we treated again for 1 month, just 1 capsule a night, 50 milligrams. And sure enough, boom, the levels came right back down to normal.
Chase's occasional use of thalidomide works for him.
Beautiful job, thank you.
But for most people, the side effects mean that sooner or later they have to stop taking it.
Now, what I do want to do is I just want to listen to your chest, if I may.
Sure.
And
there was a bit of neuropathy. I did feel a little bit of tingling around my mouth area.
After 4 years on thalidomide, Nancy began to experience bone pain, a sign that the effect of the drug had weakened. Her cancer had come back again.
Sometimes the side effects become such that you have to reduce the dose, and when you reduce the dose, the effect on the myeloma begins to weaken and the myeloma is able to grow.
This combination of the threat to women who might want to have children and the side effects mean that scientists are now looking for an alternative to thalidomide, a drug based on it but without the dangers. And there may be one on the way, developed by Celgene, the American manufacturers of thalidomide. They have spent 10 years exploring so-called analogues of thalidomide, chemicals that are based on the thalidomide molecule, but with subtle changes.
As we learn more about the activity of the drug, we can use that knowledge to make safer versions of thalidomide. And hopefully you end up with something that has accentuated the positive activities of the drug, while at the same time minimizing the side effects. So ultimately, we would like to retire thalidomide.
Finding an analogue of thalidomide has proved immensely difficult, precisely because no one really knows how it works.
We still don't know the absolute molecular targets for this drug. So for that reason, we couldn't do the normal drug development where you test compounds against the known target. So it's trial and error. You make small changes on the molecule and then you go test them in the laboratory to find improved activity.
But eventually, Sterling and his team made a breakthrough. They removed one particular oxygen atom and introduced a nitrogen atom. The precise placing of that atom was crucial.
Now, those simple chemical changes had to be at very specific sites on the molecule. When you make the same chemical changes in other parts of the molecule, the drug has no activity.
What they found was that when the nitrogen atom was in this position, the drug is highly active. They called their new drug Revimid. And it seems to be far more effective than even thalidomide.
The benefits of Revimid are that the positive activities of the drug have been increased over the parent molecule from anywhere from 100 to 1,000, 2,000-fold.
Then they had to find out, did it cause birth defects? They ran a series of tests.
It's very difficult to prove a negative in these kinds of models. But from all of the FDA requirements, Revimid has been shown to not cause any of the birth defects that thalidomide's shown.
Further trials seem to show that Revimid may not cause the other unpleasant side effects of thalidomide, such as neuropathy.
Patients don't see the sort of side effects where they have numbness and tingling, constipation, sedation, and the types of quality of life symptoms that are so much of an issue if you're on long-term thalidomide.
I feel good on Revimid. I've been on Revimid for almost a year now, and my blood statistics are higher than they've ever been before. My red blood count, my white blood count, they're all in a normal range. I'm really delighted that it works the way it does, because I really wouldn't be here without it.
What's impressed us is that in patients who have either been intolerant of thalidomide or have actually run out of benefit from thalidomide, when they have been treated with Revimid, they've actually benefited. And that's very exciting because it means you can use one after the other.
Revimid could be a major breakthrough in the fight against myeloma. And currently, thalidomide and its analogues are being used in over 150 clinical trials worldwide. The success with thalidomide has led to a major rethink in the battle against cancer. The theory now is you don't just attack the tumour, but its whole surrounding environment.
Thalidomide has revolutionized the way we think and the way we will treat cancer in the future. Someday, with targeted therapies like Revimid, like thalidomide, together with other conventional and new agents, I strongly feel will result in a cure. For now, at least, patients should know that their prognosis is better than it ever has been, and that we do have the opportunity to markedly extend their lifespan.
All right, actually not bad, very stable.
Thalidomide and Revimid are not cures, but they could turn some forms of cancer into long-term illnesses rather than fatal diseases.
Thank you, Paul. I feel very hopeful, and I feel that I'm in a good spot, and I feel that they're coming close to treating multiple myeloma as a chronic illness, and that's really my hope, of course, eventually for a cure, but as a chronic illness would be great.
People have asked me, am I cured? And the answer is almost certainly not. But who cares? If I have controlled the signs and symptoms of the disease so that it's growing harmlessly in my bone marrow, not dissolving my bones, not killing my kidneys, then what's the harm of having cancer if it doesn't harm you?
Thalidomide achieved notoriety because it ruined so many lives. But so far, there have been no reported cases of babies being born with birth defects as a result of its use against cancer. So, half a century after its discovery, provided a truly rigorous system of controls can be established, thalidomide may start to achieve redemption.